Welcome to the OTTRED Spotlight Podcast. I'm lucky enough throughout the course of my day-to-day duties within OTTRED and as the Chief Executive of Red Holt to meet some amazing people, predominantly those that run and influence the OTT sector. Today, I'm going to be with Dipashree and I'm going to let her unpack the amazing story of her career with you so that you can hear how she's worked for some of the most iconic brands within the sector, and at a more personal level, some of the lessons that she's learned, not only about marketing, personal marketing, and what it takes to grow an amazing region such as the one she's been working in, hubbed from Singapore, but then also from a more global perspective, some of her thoughts and feelings about where the industry is and where it might be going. Dipashree, welcome to the OTTRED Spotlight Podcast.
Thank you so much for this absolutely astounding opportunity. I can't believe we are finally meeting in person.
I know. Here we are in Studio Red.
I know. After knowing each other on online and on LinkedIn for so long.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Me too.
How are you feeling?
Oh, great. I've followed your work for so long. Absolutely a big admirer of the OTTRED podcast. You have had some really amazing people on this podcast. I feel like I have really big shoes to fill.
Well, you know what? I think a lot of people will be watching this and listening to this as well, Dipashree, because some of the brands you've worked for are pretty iconic.
Yes, I've been very fortunate to have been given a chance to have worked with those brands, and I think I'm better for it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get into all of that. But first of all, for those that don't know you, give us a whistle-stop tour of your career, what you've been doing, where you've come from, where you are now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I think of myself, I've worked for now 21 years and I joke that it's time to retire, but clearly, something in me keeps going. So of these 21 years, I've spent 15 plus years in marketing and 5 years as a hardcore content producer. And it's a unique mix of marketing. I look back and I realize that I've done equal parts B2B and B2C marketing across three, again, unique streams of marketing, which is brand marketing, content marketing, and partner marketing. Very fancy terms, and we'll talk about what they all mean. But I've learned so much while doing all of these for some of these iconic brands that you talked about. And I've spent 5 years in broadcast and in digital content, really learning the ropes of how to create content strategies, how to really ensure that that content that you create reaches out to thousands and millions of people. Some of the finest hours of my life were spent behind the camera lens and some of it in front of it.
Yeah.
And that's essentially me, really, like at heart, a storyteller and hopefully a data-backed one now, having worked for consumer goods and tech companies. I think at my very core, I'm extremely passionate about ensuring that more women are in the workforce and in senior positions.
Yeah.
Of course, in C-suite, but while that's very important, it's important to have us in mid to senior level positions as well. I think the wrong narrative has been built, and I absolutely detest it, that we should be pitted against each other. That helps the patriarchy. That doesn't help us. So I am a big champion of more of us getting to the top or the middle together.
I saw you made a post recently about 3 top tips for women to help each other. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
Can you remember off the top of your head what those tips were?
I do. In fact, those are 3 things that I have tried to do myself. One is all 3 are so blindingly simple, right? So the first one is, whenever there is an area of expertise that is not your area of expertise and is a colleague, let's say a woman in this case, her area of expertise, loop her into that email. The human tendency in a man or a woman, more in a woman because she thinks that she'll have to share that spotlight, becomes that, if I loop her in or CC her into that email, my spotlight's going to go. And you couldn't be further from the truth. That's just absolutely wrong. When you loop her in and when you say, hey, I'm going to CC in Priya because she is the marketing expert on this and she's going to answer the question that you've just asked, shows you the magnitude of your leadership, not the other way around.
I love that.
That was the first one. The second one was sharing credit. This I did myself. So It was with a very difficult colleague. And there was always a tension between the two of us as to who would be the lead of the campaign, even though it was understood that I was the lead of the campaign. But how do you ease that tension over? You ease that tension over by creating credit. Again, remember, that's what the patriarchy has taught us, that you should be pitted against each other because, we've only given you this much space, so where only the two of you fit, so fight against each other. But what if we didn't fight against each other? What if we made friends with each other? And then more of us could join the room. So let's say, so Dee, are you going to give us the campaign updates? Yeah, I am going to give you the key milestones. But Sneha over here did some kick-ass work on social, and I'd love for her to talk about the social wins.
Yep.
What a boss move, right? And I think the third one, which I do very often and which has been done to me, is I once got a call from a recruiter saying that your ex-colleague from Netflix has recommended you for this head of marketing role, and she spoke very highly of you, and she said that you would be right for this role. That just made me feel that I was being spoken of in rooms that I hadn't entered. And if I could repay that favor or pay it forward, I will do it every single time. And I do it every single time. I don't take a role. I immediately say, hey, but do you want a recommendation? I know someone, she's absolutely a genius. And I'd put my bottom dollar down to recommend her.
I know you do a lot of stuff around the kind of mentoring side of things as well and trying to help others. How much time and effort do you invest in that? It's obviously it's something close to your heart. What are the kind of activities that you undertake around that?
A couple, actually. So I have this career chats over coffee that I try and do monthly.
I love this. Yeah.
Thank you. So it's a monthly session. It's free for anyone who wants to join. It's not a transactional activity. So I've done it in Singapore. I've done it in Mumbai. I think the idea was to try and do it in Dubai, but I don't think I had enough time. Perhaps the next time I'm here, we could do it together.
Yeah. I'd like to do that.
Yeah.
Actually. It'd be good.
So the idea is that you come with your questions, and people are actually quite shy to ask what they think are tough or sometimes nervous to ask the difficult career questions. In this forum, there's no shame. There's no judgment. So you can ask me any question that you want. And I may not have all the answers, but as a community, we will find the answers for you, right? So I started doing it last year because I felt that there was a lot of questions and nowhere to ask them. And then it became a thing. So now I do this thing every month. In terms of time investment, it's one weekend a month. It's really nothing. I could spend that weekend sleeping, but
it's not you. That's not very you.
And in terms of prep, it takes me about an hour and a half to go through everyone's questions, which I request them to send in advance, and another 3 hours to do the session. I do take time out, though, to additionally respond to as many DMs as I can on LinkedIn. I know you do too. And that's what I think is the purpose of the platform.
Yeah.
So for those of you that do not respond to your DM, that's your hint. Yeah. Kindly respond.
Definitely.
Not to all. Some of it is just...
I think it's really important.
Yeah.
I think there's two levels of it for me. Firstly, the personal level. If you don't respond to people, and it is hard to respond to everything. I think I get a lot. I'm sure you get a lot as well. I try and religiously respond to every single comment that somebody puts on any of my posts. And the second thing actually is that when you do that, you actually you propagate the algorithm within LinkedIn. I'm sure you're probably aware of that. So the algorithm then recognizes your post as something that a lot of people are interacted with, and it elevates it on the platform. You actually help yourself by doing that. There's two layers of value done by doing that. I want to ask you about the video on demand market.
Absolutely.
Because I'm sure that a lot of people watching this will be going, wow, this lady is in senior leadership level, has been at Netflix, now at Amazon. What's your take on where the industry is?
That's such an exciting question, and thank you for asking that. So I have a couple of points of view on this. So I think entertainment and video on demand in particular is one of the last few surviving pull categories when it comes to our world right now. Think about it, right? Sports is probably one, right? Food to a certain extent is one. Beauty and fashion is the other. A lot of the other industries when it comes to, and I'm obviously talking from a marketeer's point of view, A lot of it is push. You are constantly shoving things down the customer or the consumer's throat. But entertainment, you can very easily, if done right, you can create a pull from the consumer's side. And a brand like Netflix and a brand like Prime Video now does that so beautifully, right? They have managed to create that relationship where, yes, there is a decent amount of push, but there is also a significant amount of, I want to see this. I want to see this next. When is the next season coming? When you have gotten to that stage in the VOD market, when you've gotten to that stage in your VOD life, you have cracked quite a bit of the puzzle, right? When you have gotten to people asking you, when is the next season coming, means that you're doing something really well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's on the brand side of it. Let's talk about what's happening on the business side of it. On the business side of it, about 4 to 5 years back in the emerging geographies, which is, let's say, India, Southeast Asia, South Asia, parts of Africa, there was a huge boom happening. India went overnight, and I'm just going to talk about India because I was there at that point of time. India went from 12 VOD, SVOD, OTT to 43. So our slides overnight began looking very different, right? So that boom is now, to answer your question, that slide is looking very different now. What had then been predicted was a consolidation, which is what is happening now.
Yeah.
Some of the powers that be have rightfully so consolidated some of the smaller players, because the smaller players, at the cost of quality of content, at the cost of quality of streaming, at the cost of quality of tech, were not able to deliver to customers. They were scaling too fast, but they were compromising on A, B, and C that we just talked about, right? So that's the second trend that's happening. The third that, and I know we're going to talk about Indonesia in a bit, the third that's happening in massively in countries like Indonesia and India, and probably to a large extent even in Africa, is the growth of the local superpower.
Absolutely.
Right? These guys move stealthily, but they move fast. The local VOD, right? For a while, until I want to say about 2018, it felt like there wasn't going to be much success. And then there are certain players that understood the market, understood the local nuances, got funding, local. Most of it is local funding from really big local players, and went straight for the kill. So those hyper-local VOD, SVOD, OTT players are also understanding the game, are also understanding what works. Remember, at this point, I must make a departure and say that not all of them are actually producing local content. They are syndicating content and they're saving money.
That's interesting.
And they're saying, we may or may not do too much local content because we don't have the budgets for it. So they're looking elsewhere and saying, could sports be one of the things that they could do better than everyone else?
Yeah.
So while there is definitely some amount of local content production, there is a whole lot more bent towards syndication.
This is interesting for me because something that you mentioned earlier around inbound eyeballs.
Yeah.
You know, you don't need to push the marketing that much because the gravity generally of what Netflix commissions or Amazon, you know, I watch both with my family.
Yeah.
You know that if something makes it onto that platform, it's got the substance behind it to have earned its way onto that platform.
Right,
so you kind of know it's going to be good. What's interesting to me is the amount of cost that adds to the P&L of an organization like that. It's huge. You know, the originals channel of content to surface that for the consumers, there's a lot of cost associated to that. It's good, but it's super expensive.
It is.
It's interesting for me now to hear that these, you called them local superpowers. I love that term. The local superpowers have worked out actually how to do things more efficiently when it comes to disrupting the market from the global superpowers.
Yes.
Do you think that's a trend that's going to
continue globally?
That is a trend
because their costs are low. Their overheads are much lower, right? One thing we must acknowledge, and here I'll speak from a Netflix point of view, which is my ex-company, right? Netflix knew very well that the first 5 to 10 years is sheer investment. There is no expectation of turning a green in the P&L.
Yeah.
There is an understanding that it might happen, and it probably will, But the reality is when you go into a market like India or Indonesia, where the local entertainment industry is so strong, what are you going to do? Are you going to play for the market or are you going to play against the market? You have to play for the market, right? And to play for the market, to give you a sense, there are 2,000 movies made in India every year. So if you want to win that market, let's take a wild guess what you have to do.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So the cost is an accepted cost. Now, what the local guys are doing is they have waited, they have learned their lessons, and then they have figured what is so there's a right to participate and then there's a right to win, right? So they have decided that our right to participate will be A, B, and C offerings. So let's say, lower price. But they also know that price is not a differentiator forever and ever in any market. Anyone can come and undercut you at any point of time.
Yeah.
Then they have said, maybe, just maybe, we can offer local content which is syndicated. Okay, great. Maybe one other player can do that. What is my right to win? My right to win can be sports that no one can give. Now for that, I need funding.
Yeah.
So that's how these people are hyphenating themselves and really just offering hyper-local offerings, which, here's a caveat though, we still need to observe the next 3-4 years to see how and where the dust settles.
Yeah.
Because the last 5 years was working itself towards a consolidation. The next 3 to 5 years will work itself to this power balance.
Let's talk about marketing now, because that's your domain, right? So what happens in your life, in your big fancy office with a big fancy desk, when you look at what's coming out on the slate? When do you get visibility of the content, and what do you do with your team when you start to go into action mode on, okay, this is coming down the line, we need to start to make the market aware of this? What happens in one of those big organizations when someone that's got the accountability that you've got to the global leadership needs to prepare a market for something new?
Yeah. So in my current role, the role is to drive the growth of Amazon's subscription services through the partners that we work with. So these partners can range from telco partners or device partners, right? Which means that think of the partner's marketing machinery as an extension of Amazon's marketing machinery. Now you might wonder, why would partners be interested in offering their marketing machinery?
It's a vital part of the ecosystem.
Correct.
Right?
So partners are in it for the long game. They are not playing a short game. They are not in it for acquiring, 1 million customers. They could do that very easily. Telco customers do that in 2 months. They don't care about it. What they want is one of 3 things. They want acquisition, they want engagement and retention, and they want advocacy. We can give them all 3, right? Why? Because our subscription services ensure long-staying customers, right? And that's where we come in as the marketing team, where we say we've got all the tools to help you do all these 3 things. So to answer your question, Chris, when we work very closely, so think of us as the glue between the external world and the internal world, the internal world being that of the company and the external world being that of the partners, right? So we are in constant touch with both of the worlds. So just to give you an example, we have weekly meetings with all our partners, bi-weekly with some of them, and we have WhatsApp groups with all our partners. That's how
everyone lives on
closely.
WhatsApp groups now. Yeah.
Correct. And we swap notes. So what happens is when we know what's coming on a monthly basis, our job it is to inform the partner, sometimes pitch to the partner, and craft those plans together. It doesn't end at just, hey, this is coming. What do you want to do? No, hey, this is coming. I think this is the audience for this. This is how you should target, and this is the plan we should make together. But does it fit into your business priority? Or what is your business priority for the quarter? Can I stencil mine onto yours? So that's a very day-to-day sort of exercise that we as a team have to do. And there's like a whole lot of if, but, not approvals back and forth and all of that. Larger, the way I think about it is, very strategically speaking, how can either parties enable each other to grow their businesses. That's what they are in it for. So what do I mean by that? Take the example of a telco partner. Telco partners are giving away data 5 GB, 10 GB. Do you know the amount of wastage on that? Easily 80%.
Yeah.
How much data do you use? You're
Absolutely.
using mostly Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah.
So now that they need to retain you, not you, because I'm assuming you are postpaid, but there's a huge part of the audience still in APAC. APAC is 80% prepaid. So
Sure.
meaning there is a huge chance of flirtation,
That's interesting.
right?
Yeah.
So what happens then is that Chris one day likes Telco X, next day Telco Y dangles a carrot in front of them, move to Telco Y. So what happens then that there is no continuity in the consumer behavior? How do you bring continuity? With services like us, with services like music services like Spotify.
So do you find that the dynamic in a relationship like that is where the weight of effort that's been made is more you going to them or them actually coming to you, like, we need you?
I think it's pretty equal. I think it's equaled out. There was a time, I must admit, when I first started Netflix, it was us going to them
Yeah.
because we needed them.
Yeah.
And this is purely, I'm talking about Netflix. This is 2016. I was employee number 45 at Netflix APAC, right? I found out because there was a number 45 in the Xerox machine before my name. And so I asked my admin person, I said, what is this number 45? They said, oh, you're employee number 45.
Wow.
So that's a unique
You always
story.
remember.
Yeah. So that point of time, I will not name the company, but there is a company that we walked into and the person actually said, you guys can leave because we don't know you. So from there to now, it's a long
massively
way.
different.
Yeah, so we had to go to them because Netflix had its reflected glory from the West, but we were yet to build a name for ourselves in the East. So to not have that and to walk into a room and say, we expect you to do this, this, and this for us, and in return, we will bring you this, this, and this, you'd often get this very confused look saying, sorry, what? So I had to build that entire framework, that blueprint, along with like two of the best bosses I've ever had the opportunity to work with, right?
Yeah.
And that was a joyride you can never forget. Like you had sleepless nights and you wake up and say, did that guy actually ask us to walk out of his office? Yeah, he did.
What about the dynamic in countries that you've got within your region, like Indonesia? You know, we spoke before about here in the Middle East, we've got Saudi Arabia, and that's going crazy.
Oh, yeah. I hear all the time about it.
Yeah. I mean, the demographic there alone, the complexion of how the constitution of that country, 70% of people are under the age of 30. Unbelievable. In your patch, you've got Indonesia.
Yeah.
What's that like?
Insane. If I'm getting the numbers right, 400 million people raring to go. And the Indonesia is really the world's next global superpower to arise from APAC, often getting very overshadowed by India because we are, I mean, rightfully so, we are quite obsessed with the India story. But for a minute, if we were to just keep that aside, very similar statistics. Huge percent of the population is under the age of 25, 30. And therefore, that makes them, by design, digital natives.
Yeah.
Very hugely driven by the agenda that the current government and businesses have of being very digitally driven, right? I'll give you an example. The Dubai that I came to in 2014 looks drastically different from the Dubai in 2024, 10 years.
Yeah.
The Jakarta that I went to in 2010 and the Jakarta that I went to last year, I couldn't recognize.
Really?
So
I've never been there.
Yeah, it's a like to like. It is beautiful. Like Dubai was always beautiful. Jakarta was sort of finding its rhythm. And now when you go to Jakarta, you're like, that is a makeover if there was ever any. So it is an economy that is very much raring to go. That is where also I was telling you that a lot of the local players are taking the game really seriously. Another economy that's very interesting, quiet, but really should be the one to watch out when it comes to APAC is probably Vietnam. Smaller in size, but very mighty. and they don't play when it comes to their OTT. So I don't know very much about their market, but just something that caught recently my interest as well is how seriously the Vietnam government takes their OTT and their entertainment. And you know that they are a manufacturing hub anyway for APAC. But that aside, they're trying to build other industries, and they are basically very open for business.
Yeah.
So yeah.
When the government gets behind anything in any country, my experience is the amount of wind that industry can take in the sails just accelerates the intention so much. Entrepreneurial people jump on board. The government know they can empower those people. Things can really go places.
I mean, look at where we are sitting. I mean, I can't recognize Dubai. It's astounding what it's become and what it's going to be.
It's amazing. You know, as an entrepreneur, I wake up every morning in Dubai and I just think, wow, this is where I'm supposed to be.
I know. I've heard you say that. Like, I've heard you say that on your LinkedIn so many times.
Yeah.
And when I'm here, I hear my friends say that, and I'm like, is it like something you guys are drinking or eating? Like, where are you getting all that energy from?
It's true. It's something that you feel. I feel that every day. Something else I wanted to ask you about is keynote speaking. You know, you do a lot of that kind of stuff. You're regularly on stage. You're very into your personal brand. You're very aware of how inspirational you can be for others, and you take pride in doing that. Give me the behind the scenes look at how you feel about that. Like, is it something you've had to work hard on? Does it come naturally to you? What do you try and create by being so conscious of doing all of that stuff?
I love that question, and I'm going to be brutally honest with you. There is a lot of behind the scenes work that has gone into it in the past. So we'll talk about both the things separately, the keynote speaking and the personal branding. Let's talk about the keynote speaking first. I think I owe it in huge parts to my mom. She put me on stage when I was age 2. So, I mean, I can tell you I have zero stage fright. I'm going to let you in on a
I think we need to find some of that footage. We need to find some footage
please,
to put in the podcast.
No. But I'm going to tell you something. Here's a secret I'm going to share with you, especially the ladies who have a bit of a stage fright. I think to men, it just comes a little more naturally. To women, we just feel like it's not our God-given right to own the room, right? Beyonce said this. She has a stage personality, and it's called Sasha Fierce.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't find a better name, so I call mine Sasha Fierce too. Okay, so there was a keynote speech that I recently had to do. And while I had stayed up the night with the job that I have, I know there are a lot of questions on people's mind that where do I find the time to do this? I don't take out any time from my work to do this. That's something that I want to put on record. I do it all over the weekends, and I do it when I burn the midnight oil, which is why I have the dark circles that I do.
Yeah.
So after having stayed up the night, I still wasn't feeling very prepared because it was a very heavy day at work and I had to rush to the venue, and it was on a topic that I'm not necessarily my first area of expertise. So I just said to Sasha Fierce that you have to take over now. And I walked onto stage and she took over. And my God, that woman, right? But jokes apart, I have done this for the longest time. I've put myself through that machine. And I have just so much fun doing it that I don't think of it as a chore. My simple advice to you is, if you like it, keep at it. If you don't like it, you don't have to do it. You will find other things to do. Like, for example, like a very friendly setting like this, like a podcast, right? Don't have to, put yourself in front of thousands of people. I really enjoy that. I've enjoyed that since I was a child. I usually don't need any piece of paper in front of me. Nowadays, I keep it because sometimes the topic gets a little technical and my memory is failing me. But other than that, I genuinely enjoy talking to people and connecting with people. That's why I do career chats. That's why I do podcasts. That's why I'm trying to produce my own podcast. All for me is a manner of genuine connection. Ask yourself one question. Why do you want to do it?
Yeah.
So is it a message that you have? Is there a purpose that you have? So for me, I know what my message is. And I know what my purpose is. My purpose is genuine connection. And if I can impact even one person's life or day, by that much better, or make it that much better, my job is done. So that's on the keynote. I genuinely enjoy it. And another secret, Chris, is that the keynotes force you to prepare.
Yeah.
Sometimes on topics that are not your daily job. So that means I read. I read a lot. I research a lot. I make a lot of notes.
How do you read? Do you read books or do you...
I
learn a lot from on the personal branding side of things, which is obviously important to me.
Which you are great at, by the way.
But I thank you. I like interacting with other people to learn. That's one of the objectives for me. You know, like I'm learning from this conversation. All the people that I interview, I find that I learn so much from people at, you know, big jobs in the industry.
Yeah.
But just that interaction, I do read quite a lot as well, but I don't read about the industry.
Yeah,
I read
too.
kind of personal learning type stuff. What's the balance of how you do your learning?
So 3 things. I learn from conversations. I learn from LinkedIn. I save a lot of posts and I've started saving them in my notes app.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you curate them.
I curate them and under separate topics. And I read a lot of Forbes, Fast Company, Economist articles, and I save them as well.
Yeah.
Those are the 3 ways that I learn, but I learn the most from conversations.
Do you know what? When I do a lot of my learning as well, I walk quite a lot. I do quite a lot of long walks, and I listen to there's 2 apps. There's one called Headway, which curates books.
Yes.
It's fantastic. It will make a big book into a 15-minute read.
Beautiful.
It's really good. And then there's another one called Curio, Curio.
Okay.
Curio takes all of the feeds from The Economist and the kind of all of the publications, New York Times, etc., and then it narrates them. So if I want to listen to what's happened in the New York Times that day, I can just listen while I'm out walking. It's fantastic. And I find that ignites a lot of thoughts
this
in my
I'm not
mind
good
as well.
at. I'm mostly listening to the same playlist on Spotify over and over again.
Yeah, you should. I've got some of those crazy podcasts. I quite like hardcore motivation, like the US general shouting at you, especially when I'm in the gym. So I listen to some of those kind of things as well.
This is some epic stuff. I do want to talk a little bit about the personal branding though, because I think it gets vilified quite a bit. I really admire how you do yours, and that's how I found you also on LinkedIn. I think it's a very important currency, but I also think it should be genuine. For me, how I show up in the world is exactly who I am. There is no pretense. And when people meet me on my career chats or how you met me today, that's exactly who I am. To my family, to my friends, to my mom, to my husband, this is who I am. This is how I talk. And oftentimes I've been told maybe I should behave a little more corporate. I'm like, well, no, that's not going to happen because I'm like,
it's not genuine.
I'm 42, going on 43 tomorrow. So
of course.
Right?
Happy birthday for tomorrow.
Thank you. But it's not going to change. So my challenge in personal branding has been to show up constantly and authentically as me. And I have been secretly vilified. I have been secretly admired, more admired than vilified for sure. And I frankly don't care.
Yeah, me too.
So for me, it comes from a deep place of humility that I get at least one DM a week which says, someone's inspired by me. And that's amazing. Thank you so much. But you don't have to be like me. You just have to be like you.
Yeah.
And that's the toughest thing to do in life, to be like yourself, right?
Yeah. Isn't it crazy? Do you find, you mentioned that you're 43 tomorrow.
Yeah.
Looking fantastic for 43. I'm sure you're going to have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
But do you think you reach a point in life where that tipping point happens where you go, do you know what? I'm comfortable with who I am?
That happened to me at 40. There was a big, we're not going to get into that, but my entire 30s were very, very turbulent personally. Like one loss after another. Like I could count every 3 years there was a loss. And at touchwood around 40, when it started to stabilize, I think I turned 40 and a switch turned and I said, I actually do not care what anyone thinks of me. I only care what deep inside, can I come back home to this person that I've become? If I cannot, and if there is arrogance, if there is any lack of humility, because there is, every now and then I can sense that, oh, look at me, I've done this. No, you haven't. It can switch back on any time.
Yeah.
So I just remind myself of where I came from because I'm from extremely humble backgrounds. And what's mine is built. So it can be unbuilt.
Yeah.
By arrogance, right?
what would be your key tip to give to, let's say there's a young female out there who could really benefit from you, who's been thinking about building her reputational equity online, but hasn't got a clue where to start? Where does she start?
I think, first of all, work hard. There is absolutely no escape from that. Work smart. I mean, Gen Z and millennials, younger millennials know how to do that. I really admire that about them. Talk about your work. Talk about your work, but there are two ways of talking about your work. One is a complete show-off. The second is, if you change the tuning a bit and you talk about how your work can add value to your community, that's amazing. This that you're doing adds value to everyone listening, but also showcases your expertise, right? It showcases me, it showcases your expertise. It's a win-win for everyone. Ask yourself before you put your post out, who is it benefiting? If it is just me, and me, I think you're kind of better off not putting it out.
Yeah.
Having said that, at certain points of time, it is important to do that me, and me, because if you have been appointed to a particular role, you have to announce that.
I think people want to celebrate you at that point, don't they? Because they know what the full horizon of your personality is. They're more willing to celebrate
Exactly.
you.
So I think there are three pillars. One is, what are you good at? Second is, what value do you add? So therefore, that is the pillar that you should be amping up more and more. And the third is, what is your opinion or your take on most things on the world? That is my most favorite pillar.
I agree.
And that's the one where I would like to do most of my talking, but I think I may bore the shit out of people. Sorry for swearing.
But there's your point earlier about reaching a point of resignation where you go, you know what, people will like it or they won't, but I'm going to be me.
Yeah.
And the bore the shit out of someone risk, I actually think is fine, because the people that do like it will get really engaged, because they'll know that it's you, right? They'll know that's the fabric of what you're thinking really is. Yeah. And therefore they'll participate more, and that will propagate around an audience that really, really want to follow you.
Absolutely.
I love what you stand for. Couple of more questions that I want to make sure we cover. You've already talked to us about your expertise within the region, kind of where you've operated, and some of the geographic nuances of the potential of that region and characteristics. When you look at other regions around the world, how do you think they could learn from what you've picked up in your kind of APAC, ANZ type experience? That's
such a great question. I think about three odd things I can think about. One is, this is a softer aspect, but I'll put it first because so many people get it wrong and they never get it right. If you are, as I think of myself, as a cross-country smooth operator, right? You have to really learn cross-cultural room reading. And by that, I don't mean that you should be inauthentic about it. What do I mean by that? I mean that you should be able to learn how to respect and lean into all the culture that you're working with. So by this time, I have already worked across 8 APAC and India countries, right? So India, Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore. I'm clearly forgetting one. I always do. So I do apologize. And the Philippines. How could I forget the Philippines? Each of these, you cannot lump them, right? Each of these have very different cultures, very different definitions and nuances of professionalism, very different definitions of how business meetings are conducted. So when you go into a country, you got to be respectful of what each of this means for them. Now, it so happens that, very rare, but so happens that all of these cultures may come to you in one room. How do you work their room? Taiwan, I told you I forgot one country, was one of the most difficult countries for me to work in. Why? Because I did not speak the language. I had to pitch a TVC concept to the CEO and the VP of marketing of the company I was working with via an interpreter. I have not sweated that much in a cold climate that I did on that day, Chris. But what that taught me is, and when I announced to them that I was leaving to India, the lady actually had tears in her eyes. She said, we have never worked with someone who's so willing to understand our ways of working. And that to me was the biggest compliment that I could get, because I was an outsider trying to lean in.
Making the effort.
Exactly. So my advice to anyone wanting to work in this beautiful region that is so multicultural and mistaken as homogeneous. Outsiders like us always think that it's homogeneous. I have learned that it's not. Likewise, APAC is not homogeneous. So you should be an outsider trying to lean in and understand the nuances and absorb those nuances. So when you walk into a room, feel the room first before you pretend that you know anything.
Is that something you think you've become good at? Is that one of your signatures in terms of at this point in your career?
I want to say I've been told I am good at that. Yes, my partners have said that. So can I get better? 100%. But have I covered a long distance? Yeah, in the last now 7 to 9 years of working across these countries, I've learned a thing or two. That's one. The second is, I think, the massive digitization, right? I have been fortunate to be in Singapore when Singapore was making the first interactive YouTube video back in 2010. I wrote the script for it. From there to now, where Singapore government has just announced additional subsidies for citizens of Singapore who want to upskill with AI, it feels like coming back like a full circle. That a lot of how that can be done. We talk about digital transformation so loosely, it's yawn-inducing. But how do you do digital transformation? What is the framework? What is the blueprint? How do you take an organization or a brand from a 0 to a 1 to a 1 to a 10? I have been there, not once but multiple times. Let me name that. When Singtel launched Data Spark, we were a 2-people team, me and my manager. When Netflix went from employee number 45 to now, I don't know, my God, I can't even remember how many people we are in APAC. I was there. When I started my current team, it was just me, and now we are a pretty big team, right? So this is an experience that I think a lot of people are experiencing now as they build this beautiful region that you are sitting in, and you're very fortunate to build. And I think the last thing that I'd leave you with is hyper-localization. APAC's great at it. Because APAC realizes that APAC is not homogeneous. So an equivalent of Kareem in APAC would be this company called Grab. Grab will do a great job of hyper-localizing its offerings in Singapore versus Malaysia versus Indonesia. Right?
Same company.
Localized
offering.
Right. Very localized versus Thailand, for example, versus Philippines.
Yeah.
And that is what is required for anyone looking to grow their offerings here. Again, I repeat, the biggest mistake you can make is that because people belong to one geographical area, they're culturally all the same. They're not. Even the most minute of differences could mean that you need to be able to capture that difference, that nuance in your marketing strategy to be able to stand aside from or apart from your competitor. And that will mean your consumer will choose you over your competitor. That's how Netflix gets ahead of the game every single time.
Is there a limited horizon to implement that when you're looking at the UI of an OTT platform? Because other than the content, I'd imagine that HQ of most of these organizations are saying, that's how we want the carousel to look.
Right.
And I often wonder about this, not just from a cultural perspective, but personalization. It's a big topic that I'm passionate about. Personalization could go much further, in my opinion, than we see on most of the big platforms.
Right.
I had this conversation with the head of an OTT platform in this region, not Dubai, but in the GCC region. And they said, Chris, familiarity is such an important thing.
Yes.
And trying to be generic enough but consistent enough with the theme of personalization gives us, it's a really delicate thing to play with. What's your posture on that? I guess as a marketeer as well, someone that looks at the way something is to interact with for the individual, I can imagine you being super creative around those kind of things if you had the latitude to do so.
Yes and no, to be honest. That's a difficult spot to be in. I agree with this gentleman or lady, whoever said this. Because familiarity is a thing. And as a customer or a consumer, you will get irritated if you see your carousel change every month, wouldn't you? So Netflix, and I can speak from that perspective, was very careful about making even the smallest of changes. Hours and days and months of research would go in before if you notice now, the very big poster on top, it's called the billboard. Before the billboard was brought out, it was thought of over and over and over again. But Netflix is also that beast that decides that you fail fast. So behind the scenes, a lot of failing is happening before the success is brought to you. I agree with you that AI is going to change the personalization game, and we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of it, right? But as a marketer, do I have more leeway to be creative than the product guy? 100%. Because I can change my creatives from today to tomorrow to day after, and none's the wiser.
Yeah, absolutely.
But do I also expose my brand to that much risk? Of course I do. But depends on who your boss is, though.
It's interesting because we had Eric Chalon, who is the director of products from Atelier Creative Technologies from California, in this studio about a month ago. And he said exactly the same thing. Yeah, he's a product guy, right?
Yeah.
So he was talking about the life cycle, product development, all that sort of stuff. It's interesting now talking to you and how much your eyes light up when you get to talk about creative horizons.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, you and Eric, if you're in the same organization, have to operate to the same protocol, right? The way that their business wants to operate.
Yes, but I can tell you that the marketing life cycle is allowed to be a little more fluid at Netflix, for example. You are expected to be, because the product life cycle, like I said, even though they are failing fast in the background, they cannot afford to piss Chris off by changing his carousel and making a big mistake out of it.
Yeah.
And the marketing life cycle, on the other hand, can I do a little bit of a test campaign and see what works? Sure, I can.
Yeah.
And social is where it all comes out to play. You can test something on social, see if it works, and then roll it out in a big way.
I'm not sure if you know, there's a company called Kling. Have you ever heard of Kling?
Yes, I have.
So you'll know they focus on subscriber retention.
Yeah.
I was talking to Gilles, their chief executive, recently, and Gilles said to me, Chris, a lot of what we're focusing on is what is called now subscriber conquesting, which is no longer about subscriber acquisition. It's about conquesting, which is invading other lands and taking their
Very
subscribers.
aggressive.
Well, it's not Gilles' term, it's an industry term. But it really got my attention because it made me realize, a little bit like the mobile phone market, that things have got to a stage where market saturation is at such a level where the opportunity to acquire new customers is limited. It's actually about taking customers and taking wallet that's been spent elsewhere. The dynamic, as you mentioned earlier, is maturing and changing when it comes to the ARPU associated to anybody that's willing to dive into their wallet and subscribe to your service.
Yeah. Back in Unilever, in my very first company, one of my bosses had said, retaining market share is way more difficult than growing it.
Yeah.
And I see that now. And I was like, what? I only have to retain my market share in the next year and not grow it? He's like, we'll talk when the year is over and you are sweating because you have not been able to do what you've been asked to do.
I think that's the mood music of the market at the moment, retaining market share. That's why I think Kling is so fantastically well positioned in the space that they operate in. Every company, in my opinion, really needs that kind of influence on having advanced strategies when it comes to subscription retention. I want to wrap up with a question that I ask everybody. It's more of a personal question than a business one, but your response might be more business orientated, but that's totally up to you.
Okay.
What advice would you give to the younger you?
Wow, that you just took me by surprise. Okay, what advice would I give to the younger me? Was very risk-taking, extremely risk-taking. Actually, just do what you're doing. Don't be scared. I know you're scared, but I'm here. I'm going to take care of you.
That's nice.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you. It's been a pleasure to meet you. I'm so glad that on the birthday trip whilst you're in Dubai, we managed to connect and that you came to Studio Red to meet us.
This is my birthday gift to me.
Well, this is it's my birthday gift to you as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I cannot explain what a pleasure it is to finally meet you, Chris. Thank you for this beautiful opportunity.
Thank you so much.